Hi, my name is Yulia, and this is the News Brief. Here we discuss several expertly tailored stories that I consider to be the most relevant to today, twice a week. And then we discuss them together in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. And as per usual, I highly request that you comment your questions, suggestions, and constructive criticism, because I read all of it, and I value your opinion a lot. Today's topics include Russia kidnapping Ukrainian children, Biden's administration planning to supply Ukraine with as many weapons as humanly possible before the end of his term, and Russia's very big troubles in Syria. Let's go. Starting with Ukraine section. Yale researchers identify 314 Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. Yale University researchers have confirmed the abduction of 314 Ukrainian children from the Donetsk and Luhansk regions by Russia since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. The children were relocated to at least 21 regions of Russia, where they were exposed to pro-state and militaristic propaganda. Of these, 166 have been placed with Russian families. The report reveals that Russian military transport aircraft, including those operated by the Russian presidential administration, were used for the deportations in May and October 2022. The program, which forcibly adopts Ukrainian children into Russian families, is managed by Vladimir Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova, Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights. Both are subject to an international criminal court arrest warrant for those actions. The photo accompanying the report highlights the Russian regions where the children were moved to and adopted. Also, don't forget that Maria Lvova-Belova herself kidnapped Ukrainian children and adopted them to her family. Yeah. Quite an ombudsman for children's rights, isn't she? What a lovely woman. Mayor of Dniprorudne killed in Russian captivity. Yevgeny Matveyev, the mayor of Dniprorudne, has tragically died in Russian captivity, the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration reported. Dniprorudne was seized by Russian forces in late February 2022, and Matveyev was subsequently taken prisoner. He endured 2 years and 8 months in captivity, reportedly subjected to torture. During the latest prisoner exchange, Matveyev's body was returned to Ukraine, confirmed Ivan Fedorov, head of the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration. This is actually quite interesting, and I don't mean interesting as in, oh wow, cool. I mean as in like, this is not the first time I hear a story like that, and it's not the first time it comes from Zaporizhzhia. A year ago, I visited Zaporizhzhia, and I talked to a mayor of a small town that has also been seized by Russia, and he currently lives in Zaporizhzhia, and he had told me the story of how he was kidnapped because Russians wanted him to be on their side, and basically the deal was, if you join us and if you start enforcing Russian laws and helping us transition, then we are not going to do anything to you. But he is a patriot, and he decided to endure torture and decided to endure whatever was coming for him in order for, instead of helping Russians. And his story of his escape was actually quite fascinating, and I have an interview recorded about it, but I haven't had the chance to put it out yet. So you know what? Maybe this is what I'm going to do on my personal channel, so stay tuned. But yes, I can confirm that this is not the first story, and I have heard one just like that myself, except the person that I've spoken to was obviously much luckier. And this is a story that happens to so many civilians, not just figures of authority and not just soldiers in Russian-occupied territory, which is why we always say that territories are people. And freeing those territories from Russia means freeing people from torture and persecution and a lot of other horrendous things, because if you freeze the conflict, it doesn't mean the war is going to end and the suffering is going to end. It just means that military action or direct military action that you can see from space will end. Ukraine urgently needs 20 additional air defense systems to prevent blackouts. Ukraine requires 20 more Hawk, NASAMS, or IRIS-T air defense systems, along with missiles, to operate them. To prevent widespread blackouts, Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha stated at NATO headquarters in Brussels. We can't intercept all the flying metal with empty air defense systems, he emphasized, underlining the critical need for continued military support to protect Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Amid all of that, some more bad news. Ukraine's NATO membership stalled amid lack of consensus, according to Deutsche Welle.
Ukraine's foreign minister went to Brussels with 2 asks: more air defences and an invitation for his country to join NATO. The latter, he says, is the only real guarantee of security in the face of Russian aggression.
Now is a true time of geopolitical certainty. And we need this certainty. We need strong decisions to strengthen us, to strengthen our capacities.
But leading his first of these meetings as Secretary General, Mark Rutte was quick to push the question of membership aside.
I would argue, let's not have all these discussions step by step on what a peace process might look like. Make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to get to a position of strength when those peace talks start.
Meaning it is a request which seems unlikely right now. With the US awaiting a change in leadership come January and Germany facing elections a month later, the pair fear such a request could drag NATO into a war with Russia.
We share the concern that Mark expressed for Ukraine in this ongoing aggression, but that only reinforces our determination to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to deal with what it's facing on the battlefield.
The alliance says anything other than a strong Ukraine risks emboldening others contemplating a similar path of aggression. Aside from Ukraine, meetings in the building behind me will address other threats to NATO members: cyber attacks, infrastructure sabotage, energy blackmail, as well as threats from pro-Russian political parties in countries like Georgia, Romania and Bulgaria. The conflict in the Middle East, including instability in Syria, was also on the agenda, with the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan engaging in a series of bilateral meetings on the issue. The Jordanian king was also invited as a special guest. Day one ended as it began, with a final working dinner again on the war in Ukraine. But still, no sign of NATO membership on the menu. Victoria Innes, TRT World, Brussels.
Of course, the lack of consensus, and of course, always stalling, and of course, always lack of decision-making with our allies. This is something that Ukrainians, unfortunately, are so used to. I don't know why Ukraine is being treated a lot differently than Germany was, because Germany was granted a NATO membership with partial membership at first based on the territory of Germany that was under the Western rule. And then later, the territory that was returned to Germany was also included in NATO. So I'm not sure why this is such a big deal when it comes to Ukraine, because this scenario certainly could be implemented. The only real guarantee for Ukraine is full NATO membership, 30th anniversary of Budapest Memorandum.
So we went on the streets today to speak with people across Kyiv to find out what their opinions are about nuclear threats by Putin, about NATO in general, and about the Budapest Memorandum.
I think back in the day it was a partially necessary agreement. Unfortunately, we didn't follow through. We didn't check all the details of the memorandum. That backfired on us, which is the reason why we are at war today, at war with one of the guarantors of the memorandum. So
that's the totally yeah. That's all.
Of course, I don't agree with it. Yes, but it was our history, and now we have like points we have to solve.
It's too much complicated than just a promise, and eventually people change all the politics and everyday's news. I don't know. I don't believe in this kind of protection.
Budapest memorandums is not work. All institution in the world is not work.
I can say that actually the expectation was completely different, but we didn't receive a real guarantee of our safety. So it means that this memorandum just doesn't work.
Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has emphasized that full NATO membership is the only true security guarantee for the country. This statement, issued on the eve of the 30th anniversary of the Budapest Memorandum, highlights the shortcomings of the 1994 agreement. And that anniversary actually is today, December 5th. Signed in Hungary by Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom, the memorandum promised to uphold Ukraine's security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity in exchange for relinquishing the world's third largest nuclear arsenal. And I know there's going to be so many people in the comments coming for me and saying that these were not security guarantees, they were just security assurances. You guys, do you think that the third largest nuclear arsenal would be given up for security assurances? There were purposely two mistranslations of the agreement to make it seem a lot more staunch than it actually was. So the English version said assurances, and the Russian at the time version, the version that Ukraine was signing, actually said guarantees, and that was done on purpose so, the allies could get out of giving Ukraine what Ukraine needs if they wanted to. These were security guarantees, not assurances, and you can look into the translation issue yourself if you'd like to, and you don't believe me. EBRD approves over 1.3 billion in investments for Ukraine. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has approved investments exceeding 1.3 billion euro to support Ukraine, Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal announced. The funding will back 8 projects across public and private sectors, focusing on restoring transport and energy infrastructure, supporting government programs for distributed energy generation and enhanced energy efficiency. Shmyhal also noted that part of the funding will come as non-repayable grants, which is helpful because Ukraine is obviously in a lot of debt. And while we are going to be able to generate money once, most of our territories are freed and once we are back to full throttle, we're going to be starting with a pretty difficult situation. So it's very nice that some of these things are grants. An interesting thing happened today, a very positive thing and sort of out of nowhere thing. Remember when borscht was recognized as a truly Ukrainian dish essential to the World Heritage? Well, today, UNESCO recognized Ukrainian Pysanka as intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The Ukrainian Pysanka has been officially recognized as a cultural heritage of humanity at the 19th session of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Committee for Intangible Cultural Heritage. The session took place in Paraguay, where Ukraine, in collaboration with Estonia, submitted the application. I just wish UNESCO enforced their own rulings because, for instance, so many UNESCO heritage sites are being destroyed in Odessa and in other cities in Ukraine, in Lviv. And UNESCO doesn't say anything because the UN is useless, as we know. And every time that it happens, they just strongly condemn the airstrikes that, according to them, came out of nowhere because they never condemn Russia. They just condemn the unnamed airstrikes. So yeah, for one, it's cool because a lot of people in the world, I guess, are going to be finding out about Pysankas. But for the other thing, it really doesn't matter because it's not like UNESCO does anything or really takes care of the intangible cultural heritage. Moving on to the Western section, where surprisingly not that many things have happened this week. However, the things that did happen are very important. The U.S. to supply Ukraine with 3 types of anti-personnel mines. The United States will provide Ukraine with 3 types of anti-personnel mines, according to the New York Times. ADAM, a 155mm M692 M731 projectile that releases 36 small mines after detonating in the air. MOPMS, a modular mine system carried by soldiers deploying 17 anti-tank mines and 4 anti-personnel mines. Volcano, a system for rapid minefield creation capable of deploying both anti-personnel and anti-tank mines from trucks or helicopters.
The Modular Pack Mine System, MOPMS, is a man-portable anti-tank and anti-personnel mine system. It weighs approximately 165 pounds and contains a mix of 17 anti-tank mines and 4 anti-personnel mines. The MOPMS may be initiated by wire or by radio control. Once the mines are dispensed, they can be remotely controlled with the M71 Remote Control Unit, RCU. The module is stored, shipped, and emplaced with no container modifications. This system can be used to close lanes and gaps in minefields and at choke points to reinforce obstacles and to employ protective minefields. If the mines are not dispensed from a module, they may be recovered and reused.
U.S. plans to transfer $61 billion in aid to Ukraine by end of Biden's term. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken announced that the United States intends to transfer the full $61 billion aid package to Ukraine before the end of President Biden's term. But that, of course, was not met without opposition, and the opposition is Mike Johnson, who I don't know how people do not consider to be a Russian asset because he has pretty much always blocked Ukraine aid and always created roadblocks. But sure, that one time that he decided to help, for some reason, is the excuse. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, no immediate plans to vote on Ukraine aid. House Speaker Mike Johnson announced that Congress will not vote on additional aid for Ukraine in the near future. It is no longer up to Joe Biden to make that decision. We have a newly elected president, and we will wait to adopt to new commander-in-chief's strategy on this, Johnson stated. This decision follows President Biden's earlier request for $24 billion in Ukraine aid for 2025, signaling potential delays in U.S. support pending the incoming administration's direction. Well, I mean, it is still up to Joe Biden because he's still president and will be until late January. So it is still his prerogative. And why would you be so opposed to it, Mikey Mike? I thought that Trump's administration is going to be so good for Ukraine and they're going to end the war in 24 hours. Why would they have any opposition for the aid to Ukraine? Weird. It doesn't add up. According to the State Department, however, Ukraine has enough forces to fight in 2025, but the war will end in negotiations. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller stated that Ukraine is well positioned to continue its defense efforts in 2025, but emphasized that the war ultimately will conclude through negotiations. This war, like all wars, will end in negotiations. Ukraine will remain an independent country when it ends. Our role is to help strengthen Ukraine's position, Miller said. He also underscored that Putin has shown no signs of willingness to negotiate or abandon his territorial ambitions, maintaining his goal of Ukraine's subjugation. And that is obviously very evident if you watch the previous episode of The Brief that we released a couple of days ago, where I talk about one of the main oligarchs from Putin's inner circle talking about Putin's ambitions for the world and how they're really not interested in negotiating unless it's about the new state of world affairs and the new world order and all the territories that they want to return to Russia. Really taking the gloves and hats off and demonstrating exactly what they've wanted all along. So saying the quiet part out loud, so to speak. And of course, also Putin has clearly no plans on negotiating anything because they have given the task to governors of different provinces in Russia to, create the image of victory in Ukraine. Well, I mean, delusional. There is no victory. Russia still doesn't hold most of the territories that they've included in their constitution as Russian, but of course, go on. Image of victory. Point is, all of this points to the fact that they are not planning on negotiating, and of course, they just want to continue invading Ukraine and then going further. And at this point, you don't even have to take my word for it. You have to watch the previous episode and take the word of Putin's insider for it. Yeah. The UK Defence Minister warned of British Army vulnerability in a major conflict. UK Defence Minister James Carnes has cautioned that the British Army could face total depletion within 6 months to a year if involved in a large-scale war comparable to the war in Ukraine. He was talking about the losses that Russia inflicts on its adversary, and he was saying that with the losses that Ukraine is enduring, the British Army would likely be donezo in about 6 months. And that is something that is true, I would say, across all Europe. Europe's defenses are not strong enough. The only country that actually invested enough resources in its military in the past 2.5 years, given the state of the affairs in Europe and the world with Russia, is Poland. Poland is really taking its defense seriously, and all of the countries that are not investing as much resources and as much effort into their military as Poland is in the current state of the world are not doing enough. So you guys, I know that there are, economic issues and there are problems that you think are more important than investing into the defense sector, but trust me, it is very important. It is very, 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 very important if you don't want to end up like us. And on that sentiment, we arrive into Russia. Of course, not really, because, anyone English-speaking who would arrive into Russia would be assigned a KGB agent, potentially arrested, and then used as a bargaining chip for blackmailing the West. So yeah, we're not going to Russia for that reason, among many others. But anyways, let's discuss Russia. Russia and Belarus are to establish 3 joint military training centers. Russia and Belarus plan to create 3 training centers for joint military exercises, announced Gennady Lepeshka, chairman of the Standing Committee on National Security of Belarus. wow, is that the guy that was near Lukashenko and he was pointing to the map and saying all of these, positions that he took out of his mind, out of nowhere, that Ukraine was going to attack Belarus from in 2022? That guy? Cool. In Belarus, the center will be located in the Grodno region. In Russia, centers will be established in the Nizhny Novgorod and Kaliningrad regions. Personnel training for these centers is already underway in military institutions of both countries. Lipeshka also highlighted ongoing defense cooperation, including implementation of 3 allied defense programs in 2023, focusing on border security and military infrastructure. Signing of over 160 agreements on joint military activities for 2025. And you know why this useless statement was put out today? Because really, who cares about Russia's cooperation with Belarus, which is basically now one of the oblasts of Russia because they're kind of Russia's proxy. And we all know that they constantly do this. They cooperate on military. Belarus extended its territory to Russia in 2022 to conduct its invasion and all of that. So, why would they be publicly saying about this fantastic cooperation and how good things are going for them? Well, because things are not going good, and they're not going good in a lot of places. And one of those places is Armenia, who until recently was a member of Russia's knockoff NATO, otherwise known as CSTO. And according to Pashinyan, Armenia has left the CSTO and will not return. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced that Armenia no longer considers itself a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization and has no plans to rejoin. Let them decide what they want. We do not interfere in their affairs, Pashinyan stated, signaling a clear departure from the bloc. The CSTO, established in 1992, includes Armenia, well, not anymore, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and Tajikistan, with a mutual defense pact in the event of an attack. Armenia's withdrawal marks a significant shift in its foreign policy and regional alliances. Well, because when Azerbaijan attacked Armenia, Russia didn't do anything. Russia didn't help Armenia, Russia didn't send troops, and their peacekeeping troops that were there, frankly, have always been useless. And I think Armenia finally realized that Russia was really just using them as a pawn for their game with Azerbaijan. There is also that little incident where 2 members of this alliance attacked each other last year, and really, this alliance doesn't do anything. They sometimes have joint military exercises, but Russia hasn't really been helping anyone or been effective in any of it. So yeah, Armenia departed the CSTO, and you might think that this is a small deal, but it's a big deal because Russia's influence is crumbling, and countries' trust in Russia and Russia's defenses is crumbling too, and that is key. And speaking of Russia's failures in defense, they begin withdrawing ships from Tartus as opposition gains in Syria. Russia is reportedly withdrawing its naval ships from Tartus, its sole military port in the Mediterranean, amid the rapid advance of opposition forces in Syria, according to Naval News, citing OSINT and analysts. A Droxford maritime analyst attributes the withdrawal to deteriorating conditions on the ground. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces, supported by Russia, have been retreating for 3 days, culminating in the loss of Aleppo, Syria's second largest city. And if you know nothing about Syria, I guess one thing that you need to know is Assad's regime has been held in power basically single-handedly by Russia extending its services and troops to Assad. So what's happening now is really bad both for the Assad's regime and for Russia because they're really losing their grip on that part of the world. And Syrian rebels seized Russian armored vehicles near Hama. Rebels in Syria have captured additional Russian military equipment, including a T-90A tank and a Tiger M armored personnel carrier during their advance on the 25th Special Forces Division near Hama. I personally think that the reason that Syrian rebels planned this attack and conducted it is because they realized that Russia is a paper tiger and that forces that guard positions in Russia are really just placeholders for decoration because we've seen how they guard their own territory. And the Syrian rebels probably decided, well, it's our chance, we can try. What if it's the same here? And it turned out to be the same, and now Russia's defense forces in Syria are crumbling, and those 50,000 troops they wanted to pull from Syria and send to Ukraine, well, that's not happening anymore. But what is happening is Russia is trying to push some buttons and cross some red lines again because they want to make it seem like everything is fine and dandy and they're really not experiencing any turbulence. Russian ship fired warning shots at a German military helicopter in the Baltic Sea.
A Russian warship opened fire on a German army chopper over the Baltic Sea, Germany's foreign minister has confirmed. It's understood the crew of Putin's ship fired warning shots at the helicopter conducting a reconnaissance mission. While signal ammunition is intended for warnings rather than attacks, this incident highlights the spiralling tensions between NATO and Russia. The helicopter was deployed due to increased patrols in the Baltic Sea. While a German Defence Ministry spokesperson could not confirm Wednesday's reports about the incident, the German foreign minister reportedly mentioned it on the sidelines of a NATO meeting in Brussels. On X, the minister said that due to reports of Russia increasing its hybrid attacks in the Baltic Sea region, NATO would enhance its monitoring and protection of key infrastructure. She added that ships continue to sail through the Baltic Sea, attempting to bypass sanctions imposed on Russia following Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine.
Of course, they're going to be sending concepts of condemnation. And I mean, yes, I am taking this from concepts of thoughts and tariffs because, well, the allies seem to always be strongly condemning the actions of Russia that are meant to cross lines instead of actually conducting action. Yeah, so concepts of strong condemnation from NATO as per usual. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock confirmed the event, calling it a clear example of rising threats in the Baltic Sea region. She emphasized the need to bolster monitoring and patrols to safeguard critical infrastructure like pipelines and data cables from hybrid threats attributed to Russia and others. And while Russia did this, and this might seem like, you know, a strongman move, reasonably, they always do these types of things when they know they're losing their grip. And they're having a really bad month. The ruble and their economy is finally crashing. They're losing Syria. They're losing their grip on Georgia. The Romanian election is not turning out nearly as what they planned it to be. Moldova is also not falling for their influence. The US, well, we don't know what's going to happen in the US. We gotta wait till mid-January to find out, or late January to find out. But in general, they're having lots of problems right now. And if that trend continues, then we're going to see the fall of Russia imminently. And hopefully that's exactly what's going to happen. A girl can dream. On that note, that's all I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more like it, or just generally stay up to date with the news, please don't forget to follow this channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss new videos when they come out. Also, do like this video and send it to a friend because you don't know, maybe they want to stay informed too. And please do leave your comments, questions, thoughts, and suggestions in the comments under this video because I read all of them and I really appreciate hearing from you. Till next time.